to the Cooler Women's Wellness Tribe, the podcast. Get comfortable, get your walking shoes on, and let's get it going. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Women's Wellth. And I have an amazing guest with me today, a beautiful friend, and you'll find out a little bit more about her in a second. We have Bea with us, and Bea is a wellness expert and a yogic life coach. And just before I pass over to Bea, so we met each other at the Portugal retreat in June. And I think a few podcasts back, I spoke all about my summit, and I spoke about the retreat, and I spoke about the sisterhood and just the community there. So Bea is one of those beautiful ladies who I mentioned in that podcast. So if you want to go back and listen, I think it's the one, I talk about aliens as well. I talk about a lot in that one, but I do talk about the importance of sisterhood and community. And yeah, this is living proof of joining a community, making bonds, working together. And yeah, now we're doing the podcast, you know, we chat regularly. And that all came from this community, this sisterhood. So this is sort of evidence of that. So welcome, Bea. Thank you for joining me.
So much. So thank you so much for asking me to be here. It means so much. It feels really good. And just hearing you speak about the sisterhood, the seed that was planted on the retreat in Portugal, I just became so nostalgic just then listening to you speaking about it. It was really powerful.
Yeah, it was. It was so powerful. And I think I mentioned it in the podcast, actually, that was the first time. Well, you were there. Can you remember? I couldn't even share in the last sharing circle because I was a crying wreck. And I've never, obviously I've got my friends and I've got, but I've never had such an intense, I can't even explain it, an intense experience of people that I'd only just met. And because I'm quite introvert, that normally takes me a long time to be comfortable enough to talk about myself and comfortable. Well, obviously saying that I do a podcast and talk about myself all the time, but I mean like in a intimate setting and crying in front of people that I'd only met that week and allowing them, hugging, having a hug and not being like, oh my God, everyone's hugging me.
There were so many elements of empowerment and safety and security, being on the land in Portugal with no one around, and the security of being with a mentor who we appreciate so much in Kim, and then understanding that all those people, all those girls that had came in through that portal. The trust was immediate. I mean, when we all walked through the door, can you remember? It was just landed.
Yeah.
It's safe.
Yeah, and when we all walked through, even though we've been in the WhatsApp group, we all knew what each other's WhatsApp picture was, but we not anyone in the flesh. But even still, that we still knew each other, and we still had a feeling of each other's personalities, and it was an instant click, wasn't it? Okay, so before we get into too much nitty gritty, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So I come from a really creative background. And early days, I went to university and I did an arts degree, and that was just the most amazing time. After that, I was kind of performance and art, so there was kind of the split thing that I did. I was always craving to perform, but at the same time, as a super creative individual by myself. I was introduced to yoga over 25 years ago, and that kind of brought all of the elements of me together creatively, and that kind of sort of performance aspect of me. And I never looked back. I kind of exchanged all of it for the yoga mat. I can remember my first kind of first term of being introduced to yoga. And I was like, I'm going to smash this out the park. This is going to be ultimately my best performance ever. And I remember going into class and just waiting for the approval that I'd done a really good yoga session. And Joe, you obviously know that that's not how it works. No one's really interested in what you look like, what you do, and how well you do it, and what your yoga trousers are like. So I was, my ego was bashed like aggressively early on, and I knew that I had work to do. I knew that performing version of me had work to do, and it was loving and it was caring, but it was also really uncomfortable. And so the journey progressed, and I was on the yoga mat four times a week in class, craving the new me. And then I became a teacher within a year of intense practice. It wasn't just a sort of short yoga teacher training. It was quite intense. It was a commitment of 12 months. And then I had to go through the process of learning how to guide people, and that doesn't happen straight away. That was beautiful as well, but also quite uncomfortable. And then I just started to feel empathy for people, understand people, get energetically understand vibration, especially with a group setting. Like when people come into a session, you get that overall feeling and understanding. And then from then I just started to get into more into the philosophy of yoga and the understand, especially Patanjali and his Yoga Sutras and the 8 limbs of yoga and all those processes of living well. So it's not just the physical side. And now I coach people on all aspects of living through that concept. So everyone can do yoga. You don't have to be.
Yeah, and I think just one thing that you said there, and I think it'd be a nice place to delve a little bit deeper, is, and I know lots of people say to me, I'd love to do yoga, but I'm not flexible. I'd love to do yoga, but, and then they have this vision of a yoga teacher, and you saying as well, and again, I've felt this. So when I first started yoga, you do something and you're waiting for that, well done. But that's not what yoga's about. And I try and tell people this, that no one is looking at you on the mat. And it's a really good test and learning curve for letting go of the ego, isn't it? And I think that people associate yoga with, there's obviously some aspect, and you see the Insta yoga, and that's different. But if you are someone who wants to practice yoga, first of all, understanding that it's more than just the poses, and second of all, stepping onto that mat for the lesson of letting your ego go, because it's a life changer. And I was very guilty of it. I would chat at the end of class before I did my teacher training, and again the philosophy came after, and go, oh, I didn't do that, I didn't get up in my headstand, and I didn't hold my leg. Or you'd catch somebody else in the mirror and you're like, right, their leg's really high, why is my leg not that high? And you'd sort of be like, I'm rubbish at this, my leg didn't touch my head. And once you realize that is your ego is a separate entity, and then you have your soul, that yoga really helps with that, doesn't it? Just what would you add to that?
Asana, which is like one of the aspects, it's one of the limbs of the 8 sutras, is the best bit, because it basically mirrors everything that you do in life. So whatever your response to your practice is you in every moment of your living existence. So for me, I was judging myself on my performance in everything. And so, that's what we do, because especially in a time of social media, which is, in that sense, it's beautiful to see. It's really important that we can see that happening, that kind of like physical beauty that people are able to get to. But it is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole volume of expression that exists underneath. So it has its place and it's vitally important, but not giving it over, like not giving it so much importance that it's everything.
Yeah, yeah. I get.
So
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, coming back to your point there of the way that you are on the mat reflects how you are in your life. And yoga is just a giant mirror. So, like I've just said, I was comparing myself on the mat and outside the mat and not feeling good enough in certain places because I wasn't doing things the same as other people. And yeah, big lesson learned. So then what I was learning on the mat was, don't look in the mirror at other people. There's no need to. Focus on me, focus on my breath, focus on my alignment, focus on how my body feels. It doesn't feel good to have my leg up there, so I'm going to put it here. And then taking that away with me to work. Okay, I'm not looking at them, I'm not comparing. They're not me, I'm not them. I do it this way, they do it that way. And being able to separate that this is me and that is them. And I don't need to compare. There's no competition. There's no judgment.
So like, so everything outside of yourself is going to be comparable, and it's going to be a judgment. And so if your focus is there, ultimately you'll be seeing a difference, and it will make you feel a certain way, and it will cause stress of some sort. But if you move your focus inward to how your yoga pose feels, you can appreciate it and start to understand it and recognize if it's painful or not. Because when you're focusing outside so much, you don't see the pain and discomfort within.
Yeah.
Because you're void of that. You're void of the attention that you're giving it. So that's why so many people, when they start to go through the process of yoga, from the physical to the philosophy and the inner work, starts to get really uncomfortable, and it's very easy to detract back again to I think it's a balance, and we were talking before, weren't we, about harmonizing the two and not giving it that much focus that it's everything.
Yeah.
I think socially, our guidance through social media is to make it everything. So if we can pull it back a bit and allow that to be beautiful and appreciate it, but pull it back that that's not everything.
Yeah.
Because every single person on the planet is completely unique. There's no way you can be like anyone else. So when you get into the appreciation of how genius you are and how unique you are, self-love starts to evolve, and you can start moving into other practices to get better at being that version of you. So.
And I think for me, the self-love started for me once I started to love and see the uniqueness in myself and other people. So again, just that comparison. And I think it's a woman thing that, we're kind of brought up, TV shows. If you think of the relationships we see of women on TV shows, and they're all very negative, and then we bring that out into our own lives. And as a teenager watching Hollyoaks, where there'd be a new girl and all the girls would automatically hate her because she'd have beautiful hair, and then that would radiate in my own life. So a new girl would come along and you would pick fault then, even if she was very beautiful, like, oh, look at her shoes, look at her teeth, look at her, you'd start picking out. And I think a lot of us probably spend our late teenagers, early 20s with this kind of, outlook on the world. And when I realized that through yoga, that actually no one's the same. We're all unique, and that is what makes us all perfect. And catching myself if those thoughts come to, a judgment comes into my head, and catching it and think, replacing it with, no, they're unique, they're doing them, I'm doing me. And then the self-love starts then, because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing me. I'm also unique. She is beautiful. I am beautiful. She's good at XYZ. I'm good at XYZ. And again, all of this just coming from practicing yoga in
It
life.
brings it to the surface, definitely. And I
Yeah.
think it's ancestral as well. It's conditioning. It's been given to us through our upbringing, and how our mothers, have attended to, unfortunately, we haven't been as supportive of each other as we could be for one reason or another. And when you go to a retreat, like, the freedom frequency, and obviously Kim's retreat as well, it is going to make you feel really emotional, because all of a sudden, all of those females that you had judgment of, that made you judge yourself, that made you feel insecure, that all those situations dissolve away, and you can hug the person that, and they can hug you back and appreciate you more. And
Yeah.
so
It's really beautiful.
hmm.
Tell me, so when you are coaching your clients, so we've touched a little bit about on ego, self-love, and taking that part of yoga away from the mat. What about when it comes to, so we briefly chatted about this before the podcast, just for the listeners, when it comes to diet. And I feel like a lot of people just assume, like everyone always says to me, oh, well, because I've got tattoos as well, everyone assumes I'm vegan because I do yoga and I've got tattoos. And it's always like a really like, but you're vegan. Like, actually, no, I'm not. Like, I eat chicken, I eat white meat. I don't eat certain meats because of choice, not because of any belief, just that my granddad was a dairy farmer and I like cows and I just can't bring myself to eat a cow. I don't eat tuna because I went swimming with dolphins and there was some beautiful tunas, and then I worry about the dolphins being within the tuna, so I can't eat tuna. So I have these reasons, but I'm not a vegan. But people automatically think yoga, vegan, and I think that also puts people off because of this perspective of it's restrictive. So how do you coach through that if you're, people who are looking to bring a yogic lifestyle in, but they don't want to be vegan, or they don't understand that you don't have to be?
That was a perfect kind of the way you put that together, because you shared two relationships you have with choices that you're making. So rather than it being about the thing, the food, the tuna or the chicken or the cow, it's about the relationship that you have with it and how you identify with it. So that's more about, from a yogic point of view, what your relationship is with what you're consuming. So if you're consuming something that you feel bad about, it will have a negative effect on you and your performance as being human. If you're abusing yourself through that relationship, then that will have a significant impact on how you're showing up as a human being. I remember getting to the point in my yoga practice, so I thought I was so clean in my diet and in my consumption. So consumption is everything. It's what you see, hear, taste, touch, feel, eat, everything. And I thought I was so clean that, ultimately I'd reached a level of samadhi, or whatever you want to describe it as divine intervention, oneness, whatever, that I was separate from the others.
Yeah.
So I'd created a toxicity around that. So my relationship with self was kind of like more ego. Oh, my Healy's just gone up. So yeah, that ultimately the goal was to be in a really good place, but I'd created a separation from it. So appreciating your relationship with whatever you're consuming, you then identify with it in a yogic way. So, if you have a glass of wine and you appreciate that glass of wine, and it goes really well with whatever you're eating, and then you can move away from that and continue your life, appreciating what you've done, not going, oh my God, I wish I hadn't had that glass of wine, and now I feel really like bad, and I'm bad, and everything's so bad, and why is my life so bad, and why do I always get in myself in this situation? It's because of why.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I like that. It's the relationship you have with the thing. So yes, you can be a yogi, but you don't necessarily have to be vegan because you have a good relationship with what you're consuming. So, you know, a lot of people choose to be vegan who are vegetarian, who do yoga, and there's that sort of community because they obviously feel bad for consuming whatever it is they're consuming. So that's, and I think again that misconception of people like, oh, to live that lifestyle you must be living in this way, but like you said, it can go too far the other way then, and you know, it turns toxic because you then start to view people who are not following that path as being less than, I guess. Like, oh, you're not vegan.
I'm
Like,
better at being human than everyone else. It was quite a harsh reality when I found out that I was just separating myself out from everybody else. How dare I be of that assumption that is how it should be on the yogic path? It's not.
yeah,
It really
yeah,
isn't. And you can't reach people if you get into that relationship with self.
yeah.
Yeah, you just can't.
I think so. I sometimes I set a little homework. So if you are listening to the podcast today and there is something that you're restricting because you feel like you should be, just reflect on your relationship with that. So if you are on some kind of diet, or you know, if you're not enjoying it and it's then leading you to feel negative, just reflect on why you're doing it and the relationship with the thing, whatever it is, and you know, see if you can heal that relationship. So you'll then be eating or following in a yogic way. So rather than like, I'm not eating that, I'm not touching that, what is your relationship with it? When you eat it, does it make you feel bad? Then yes, okay, you don't want that in. But if you enjoy that and you can walk away and not eat the thing for another few days, then, you know, enjoy it. It's not, I will just give, so before the podcast started, I'm trying not to eat too much sugar. Well, I'm not eating sugar now until my birthday, but processed sugar. So cakes and sweets. And I was sharing the same with B before we started the podcast. And this is you know, I don't feel good when I have a pick and mix at the supermarket to eat in the car on the way home. It's not a good relationship that I've got, and which is what I'm going to try and do. So rather than just putting, you know, having that harsh reality with it, maybe at the weekend I'll have a piece of cake because I don't have that, you know, it's not covered in sugar, the sugar's in, it's a completely different thing, and I feel good for eating the cake. You know, just sharing that there. So just reflecting on, you know, if you are restricting yourself in any way, that has a negative effect, doesn't it? You know, that restriction and the way that it makes you feel to restrict. You know, it's
a lot of tension when you're trying to deny yourself of things that, you know, essentially you enjoy. The one thing I would say is like the relationship, you know, are you present with what you're eating? It's like you have a relationship with your partner and you go out and you do something and you're engaged 100% in that moment, and we have a relationship with food. So are we engaged 100% with that, with what's happening? And like you said, you do it when you're driving. It's taking away the kind of maybe the boredom of driving, because driving becomes that second nature thing. We can automatically do something else, but if we become really present with driving or really present with eating the sweets, then we don't deny the self of the relationship we have of it, and we can appreciate it and move away from it. But and you can put some love into that engagement. You can put anything into those sweets. You can like just say, you know, I love these sweets. These sweets, where have they come from? How have they been made? I know I get to eat these and they're just going to taste amazing and I'm going to feel so good about that. But when you're driving, you don't actually have that kind of association. So it just moves really quickly. And then when you stop driving, you've got that moment in time where you go, I've just eaten that stuff. And
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. I get home, I'm like, oh my, I can't even remember eating them for a start. I just know that I brought five foamy shrimps or five foamy bananas, and by the time I get home, they've gone. And then I'm like, oh, I didn't need that. I didn't need that sugar. It was just boredom. It was just not being mindful of what I'm eating. Do I need it? And the relationship between it.
I'd fall in love. I'd fall in love with shrimps and foamy bananas again. I'd take the time out for them. I'd give them the appreciation that they deserve, and then see what happens. You know,
Yeah,
see if like it becomes less of a thing that you do when you're driving, and more of a thing
yeah,
you do when you really want to appreciate a foamy shrimp. And it
yeah,
might not happen as often.
yeah. Probably wouldn't, because I wouldn't. I don't know. Sometimes it's that if when you're trying to restrict, because I'm like, well, I don't need them, I don't need them, I don't need them. Like I walk over to the pick and mix, and before I know it, I'm paying for them because it's that restriction. It's the same with it. You know, once someone tells you no, like even as an adult, you want that thing. Like it's on your mind. You know, anything that you're trying to cut out, or well, mainly for cutting out. As soon as you're like, right, that's it. From tomorrow, I'm not having that. All you can think about is the thing that you're not trying to have. It's like telling a toddler not to touch anything. And I did actually read a study. There it is a site, I can't remember the actual study now, but it's an actual thing. It's a name for it, of why, you know, going cold turkey isn't the way to do things, and pulling back slowly is better because of this, the way that it, yeah, makes us tick of, right, I can't it, so now I want it. It's like the no wet paint, don't touch wet paint. And there was they were talking about that, and the amount of people that still touched just to see if it was wet. And even the thought of that makes me want to touch it. I just looked at the wall then. Like,
It's so interesting, the human psychology, that we've got this gap between the thought and the action, and all of that stuff that happens in between is just like literally a universe of energetic firing that goes off in the brain. And I mean, that's why I think Healy works so well, is that it amplifies you in a situation, brings you right back into your center, and allows you to identify in what you're doing before you take action. It's like people saying they want to do yoga. That's them in the yoga class, and this is them wanting to do yoga, and then there's all that stuff in between them arriving at the session. That's all they have to do, get past that, because there's nothing else they can do once they get there. They do what they can. It's just a very advanced system of conditioning that's broken down, that happens really quickly. The way I identify with that is all the stuff that they come up with. It's like saying, I'm not going to have a bath because I'm not dirty enough yet. Like you can't do that. You have to take a bath every day to maintain like your relationship with your cleanliness, not to get to the point where you're so detached from how you feel in yourself that you have to go to a yoga session. You've got no other option but to go to a place where you don't understand it, you don't know what it's going to do, but you have to go. So yeah, it's just showing up for yourself on a regular basis.
And last week I did a podcast on the mind-body connection. I think yoga comes really nicely into that, because it's teaching you to tune in to your body. So when you're working with your clients, how do you sort of teach them to tune in, to make that connection from the mind to the body and vice versa?
It's usually people that have had a yoga practice, physical yoga practice, generally. Always do breath work. There's always a moderate amount of physical kind of awareness initially, because it just breaks down the sensation between their normal life doing stuff to being in the present moment with themselves. So we normally do sort of just a bit of physical work. And just through those few processes, we go into yoga nidra. So that's like a moving meditation. That's moving around the body with the mind and just visualizing the body. And if I haven't lost them by then, then we go into a lot of journaling and moving everything that they are holding onto paper. And there's a really simple 5-step system that they go through to get that down. And it doesn't take long, but it's the bulk of how they can see a solution to whatever they've become focused on. So we move into their truth aspect, how they feel about themselves honestly. We talk about their relationship with, so whatever they're focusing on mostly at the moment. So they might be focusing on the bad of something rather than how they can see, just, get into the solution of it. Their energy, all aspects of their energy, what they might be attached to, and also if they're stealing energy. So if they're kind of taking too much from outside of themselves or giving too much of themselves, we kind of try and find the balance between it. And all of those things together, ultimately within 30 minutes to 45 minutes, someone can have the answer to. They can shed a layer, or they can move into their new waking life with a different aspect of self. They can step away from that session feeling different. But
sorry, go on. I was just going to say they are really good reflection points, especially the energy. Am I giving too much? It's not always, we sometimes look for blame that they're doing this, they're doing that, but sometimes it can just be you and you're doing the too much. You're giving too much of your energy, which is therefore draining you, and then you're reflecting it onto that person. So just reflecting, is it me? Am I giving too much of my energy away? Is this why I feel like I feel? And it's a really good reflection, because we generally don't want to put the blame. I don't know. Not many people, when people speak to you, or if they've fallen out with their partner, it's always their partner's fault. But if you ask that question, is it you? Is it your energy? Are you giving too much energy? I wonder how many people listening to this might even just be like,
in the heat of the moment, nobody wants to say it must be me.
Yeah.
And you just can't, because you're in the heat of the moment. We're human. We have an egoic system of survival. But on reflection, like you say, when you're moving through that process of trying to understand it, to higher yourself and to better yourself from that, then recognizing that everything that has happened is because of what you're made up of, can be really, if you're looking to grow and get better at being you, then entering into that is really vitally important, and you have to do that. Because blaming and shaming is ultimately keeps us at a vibration where everything outside of us has control over us. So that's why everything outside of us works, like social media, like the news, like our relationships with other people. It keeps us at a level. But in order to create peace with the self, and accept that we have a part to play, to play in it, eventually we'll just lose any attachment with that stuff.
Yeah.
We won't have to recognize any of that to feel anything, because we'll have our own identity with ourselves. Because what we're doing essentially is saying, you did that, and you doing that made me feel like this. No, you doing that made me realize what I have inside of here that made me feel a certain way that I had to tell you about.
Yeah.
And if I do that, then I don't have to take responsibility for any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So, that ultimately is just, again, about recognizing what the job of the ego is, because I think the ego is a really fun place to be, because it gives you the next layer of attention that you need. It's not the devil, it's not bad, it's just an awakening. The ego wakes you up.
When you feel the ego kicking in, like once you're doing, like, if I have a feeling now, I'm like, oh, what's it showing me? What do I need to work on? Whereas before I would give in. So if I have like a pang of, I don't know, an emotion, jealousy, resentment, something that I don't want to feel, those emotions. Yes, I want to be happy, and, those emotions, but no one wants to be resentful. No one wants to be jealous. No one wants to be hateful. No one wants to be judgmental. And now if I have, it could just be scrolling through social media and something catches my eye and something comes on this side on my shoulder and I feel like it's my ego. And now that I've made that connection, rather than going with it of, oh, look at that, whatever it is, it's, oh, why do I feel that way? What has it brought? And why do I feel this emotion? And then looking inward then to, okay, so this has triggered this, and then trying to find out where that stems from. And, spending the time of, oh, okay, so when I was a teenager, I don't know if you find the same, but sometimes once you start digging, things just get shown to you. So, it might be a memory of being at school and your friend said something to you just off the cuff that's stuck in that subconscious mind that you've just scrolled through social media 25 years later and it's still there and you still have that, what did you just say? But you've kept it in all of these years. Does that make sense? Gone off on a bit of a tangent, but then asking myself, right, okay, how do I deal with that? And going back within your subconscious of, we were teenagers, or, trying just not reparent, that's the wrong word. Or I guess you just go back and, put it right.
Recognize it. Yeah, you heal it.
Yeah.
You don't have to go all the way back and kind of go through the scenario again unless you want to, but you don't have to.
Yeah, it's just
knowing that trigger has presented itself, and exposed itself. If you didn't recognize that it was a trigger, then you'd be in a denial state of just the pattern. But if you can see that ego, then you can let it go of it.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's really just changed the way that I look at the world and how I view things. Just learning that, that's annoyed me, that's triggered me, why? And I know people throw the word triggered around on social media quite a lot, but for me it's when I see something that triggers an emotion, not just watching something on social media and it's like trigger warning. Like, is that a trigger warning? It's more of something, it's personal, isn't it?
They capture your attention. Very clever.
Yeah, it is. And I just think being in tune with your ego, and takes us back full circle, stepping onto that yoga mat 5 years ago was the best thing that I ever did. Like, it literally changed my mind, because first 6-8 months, it was all about the ego. It was all about, can I do the splits? Can I do this? Can I get into this pose? And then suddenly it just takes one teacher or someone just to sort of say, we leave the ego at the door. Now, that's exactly what happened, actually. So we leave the ego at the door. And I was like, what does she mean? What does that mean? Going into it again, and the ego stays at the door. And I say it now in my classes, if you're standing on one leg and you're wobbling, it's fine. Don't push it. Don't force it. Your ego is telling you that you should be standing on one leg, but we're human. We're not flamingos. Like, stop. You don't need to do it. Play with it. As soon as you start getting annoyed, stop, because that's your ego. And and they're literally the words I use. I can see when people are coming into certain poses and they're like, for God's sake, because they're wobbling. Like, no, that's your ego. Stop now. Lie down. Leave that. And then eventually you realize that, okay, I don't need to do it. It's fine. Like, I can feel it wobbling, and then you apply it to life. I don't need to compare. I don't need to judge. I don't need to get anxious about that thing. I don't need to worry, because that's and then when the ego does come up, have a conversation of, why are you showing me this?
Yeah.
And
why is
what's going on?
So breathe. So look, while we're in this human condition, we will always have aspects of ego, and it moves from contraction to release, and it shows up in all aspects of us as our human state. As we breathe, we contract, we release, and when we're in contraction, that's when where the trigger is. So that's your yoga student on one leg, wobbling all over the place, trying really hard to stay in this position, and like going to be a yoga person, instead of like seeing it, recognizing it, seeing the limit, letting go, and thinking, I'll go back to that at some point. And it's the same. Ego is trying to keep you safe. It's trying to stop you from hurting yourself. It's recognizing what safe comfort zone you've created. So we need it. We need it, the ego, so we can push through it. Push through it with appreciation of the self, so you can grow and recognize how that's going to look as you do.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think if anyone's listening to this, another little homework today as well is to just reflect on maybe some areas of your life that you're living in now where you've let the ego sort of take hold. So after you've finished listening to this, go and have a conversation with your ego. Think of those things that are really triggering you, or things that upset you, and then you end up having an argument with somebody else over it because you're taking it out. But just coming back and reflecting, like, right, why does that bother me so much? And then in whatever conversation you'll have, you'll come to the realization that there's no need for it to bother you. It's just flipping it, and it's a process. But if you just do that with the things that are really getting to you, and I think a lot of the time it is in relationships. I have to do it with my boyfriend even now, and because I have so many things, and I blame my mum. I don't think she listens to my podcast, so I can say it, but my mum is very sorry mum, I do mention her a lot, but like, as I've grown, I can see things that my mum does still. So when I go home as an adult, my mum does things and I'm like, Mum, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't know, not using a coaster, for example, and putting a hot drink on. And I get it, like, don't want to say, but you just place it down, but my mum is on it. But then I come back and I find that I pick similar things when my boyfriend, he'll do things and I have to go, right, that is not important. What's important is we're living together, we love each other. I'm not going to pick him up on that. I'm just going to, if I don't want it, then I'm just going to do it myself, because it's not worth the negative energy that I'm going to create by saying, do you need to leave that there? Or having and I probably was my mother, when my dad stays, actually, my dad does say, "You're just like your mother," so I haven't got it down to a T yet. I'm like, ugh. But just having that reflection of, right, why does this trigger me? Well, because my mum used to tell me to do that when I was a child. So now I'm reflecting that onto my adult boyfriend. Like, it's, and I don't need to, and I'm not going to bring.
Yeah. Awareness of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, it's not worth them, because then it does cause an argument. Like, don't leave that there. Don't put that there. Like, I'm not his mum. And if I don't, then I can, yeah. This tiny little example, but that's where I think, right, reflect, see why it's triggering me, learn from it, and then my action then is a positive action. Like, I'll just do it myself, or I'll just ask him kindly. There's a way as well that women do that. There's the nag, isn't there? And then there's the just the question, like, can I move this, or I'm just going to put this here.
Because it's a balance between.
Yeah.
You have absolutely every reason to want to hold a house, a space that is representative of your standards and values, so that that needs to be like appreciated by both parties. And if you're appreciating it, then they're just finding a way, your way. There's no other way but your way as a partnership, that you can recognize that together.
And it is and I have even said, like, this is what my boyfriend obviously met my mum, and that made a difference as well, because he was like, oh, okay.
I get it now.
I can see where you get it from. And having that conversation as well as this is where I grew up, how I grew up. My mum was very particular. She was a single parent with two daughters, and it was only her in the house, so it was her way. And that's obviously rubbed off on me. I lived with her for 17 years. Of course, I'm going to pick up on those traits, and as we all do. And when we make a joke of, I sound like my mother, but then we need to reflect on that. So, are we sounding like our mother and annoying our now partner, or are we sounding like our mother and it's the positive? So just reflecting on.
Like nothing for moving placemats. You don't know. It might be something he adores about you. That.
Using a coaster.
Yeah, it might be something absolutely just thinks is really special about you. I mean, for instance, my yoga teacher, before we'd have a class, he'd go around and he'd literally move the mats to the absolute millimeter of where he wanted them. And sometimes it took longer than you would think it should take.
Yeah.
Tap like a corner of a mat with his toe and then just move around. But it wasn't about that. It was about testing our relationship with his idea of how he wanted it.
Even the visual of that, I felt a little bit like, come on, just
get on
what
with it. He could have at some points he did things like that, and it took it I think he did something once, and it took the whole of like the first part of the yoga class, and you think to yourself, there's so much in that space that I had to deal with, that it probably had a more impact on me than actually just practicing. My
patience, understanding, not quite. Yeah, clever. That's very clever.
Like 50 minutes to get here. I've got, you're wasting my time. All those things, all those like really egocentric things. Massively powerful. So
wow. Oh, and I think that's a perfect place to end. We've covered a lot. There's lots of homework for the listeners. Thank you very much. I've loved chatting to you today, and I will put all your details in the show notes. So if anyone wants to chat to you about, yogic life coaching, any questions about anything we've spoken about today, you can reach out to me or be, I think just to end, you don't have to be a vegan Buddhist monk to live a yogic lifestyle. You can bring it into your everyday lifestyle. It's just the way that we use your thoughts. I think that's a nice way to sort of making friends with your thoughts.
Yeah, we want more of you.
Yeah.
Because that's what the world needs now. Lots more of you. But thank you, Joe. I absolutely love speaking to you. So thank
you. And I'm back next week with a solo episode. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you. And that's it today, everybody. I hope you have a lovely week, and I'll see you again next week. Don't forget, 5 stars, download, tell your friends. You're amazing.